Hello. I'd like to begin with the fact that this happened to me years ago, and the reason I'm posting this only now is because I was ashamed of this story and I never told anyone. For the longest time, I thought I was the only one who went through this experience and that no one would believe me. But as I mentioned, it's been more than a decade. I am happily married, have 2 beautiful children, a decent job, and my wife is a great mother who stood by me during some hard times. Where most women would leave, she stuck by me and even took the reins when I couldn't continue. I consider myself lucky and grateful after seeing so many marriages fail. Before I go into my heroine's story, I'd like to give you context of where I'm from and where I was in my life leading up to this experience. I am of European, Asian, and African descent, and I currently live in North Africa. I am white, well-built, and have never had a problem getting a girl I liked. I have been on dates, had one-night stands, and even had 2 incidents where I found out I was the mistress to someone else's girlfriend. Both times I ended it and called the boyfriends to tell them what had happened. You see, I have a code. Never sleep with another man's wife, be honest and straightforward, and never compromise my values. In 2003, I had to complete my military service. In my country, you cannot receive your high school diploma without completing it. My father did not have any connections to get me out of it, but I told him not to worry and that I would do it. It was hard, but I completed it. When I graduated, I received my Army ration card, certification, and other documents. At home, I spent time recuperating and sharing stories. We laughed, cried, and cursed. My father and brother were proud of me, but my mother was not in the picture for a long time. That's another long story I won't get into. My father raised us as a single father, and he did his best. A few months later, I began to apply for universities. And during this time, I found a good university in India, Pune, and thought, why not? Once I was accepted, my dad gave me his blessing, some money, and off I went to carve my own path. It was now 2005, and I was studying for a bachelor's degree in arts. I also picked up 2 courses in animation just for fun. I also found a job as a tattoo artist, which didn't pay much at first, but once I completed my apprenticeship, I was making a lot of money for a 19-year-old. I was also a break dancer, which gave me access to clubs, free drinks, and a variety of gigs, including fashion TV shows, club openings, and even a performance at a big salon in the city. I was quite popular and life was great. It was great until 2007. That's when I met the most manipulative, cheating, lying psychopath to ever walk on the face of this rotating sphere we call Earth. I still kick myself to this day thinking about it. There were so many red flags. She was in a group of circles I knew. It was at a club, and I approached a friend whom she knew, and we started talking. The music was loud, so my friend and I stepped out to the balcony to talk and take a break. It was probably a few minutes when my ex and her friend followed. They sat with us, and my friend introduced me to them. Now, my ex was nothing special. She was below average, chubby, and loud. I had no interest in her at the time. She did have an outgoing personality. After a long chat and a few drinks, I excused myself and went home. A few nights later, I bumped into her at the same club. She kept coming up to me and telling me lame jokes. Looking back, it's clear she was into me, but at the time I didn't realize it. I smiled at her jokes and humored her, even though they weren't funny. The 3rd time we met was at a different club. She came up to me and asked if I wanted a drink. I told her I had a few and that I had to be somewhere early the next day, so I was only drinking beer. I socialized and danced with a girl. As I was about to pay my tab, my ex showed up and asked me to buy her a drink. She really wanted my attention. I got her one, paid my tab, and said goodbye. As I was getting on my bike, I heard her calling my name. When I turned, I saw that she was alone and that her better-looking friend was leaving with another guy. Her better-looking friend had a boyfriend at the time, and it wasn't him. If I had known that at the time, I would have found a way to tell him that his girlfriend was being unfaithful. My ex then told me her friend was leaving and that they had no room for her. At this point, I'm sure you noticed a few red flags. The clubs, the way she seeks attention, forcing me to buy her a drink, her friend being unfaithful, etc. But I didn't notice any of that. Mind you, I had plenty of dates. I just don't know why I didn't see it at the time. She told me she had no ride home and that she had to wait a few hours for her friend to come get her. I should have said no, but I'm too kind at heart and didn't want to leave her outside a club of all places. At a club of all places, I told her I had a busy day tomorrow and that I couldn't drop her off at home because it was too far. She agreed, and I suggested dropping her off at a 24-hour cafe next to my flat. As soon as I parked my bike at the cafe, she asked if I could walk her in so that no guys would hit on her. I thought to myself, who'd hit on her? But I rejected the idea and assured her that it was a safe establishment and that the owner knew me and wouldn't allow it. She insisted that I at least come in and tell the owner, so I hesitated, but eventually relented and walked her in. A group of my friends were there, and upon seeing me, they whistled and cheered as if I had scored a goal in the last 30 seconds of a football match. She liked it and asked if we should say hi. Reluctantly, I nodded, but made sure she saw my displeased face. One of my close friends was drunk and grabbed me, teasing and winking at her. He suggested that she got lucky and shouldn't eat too much because she would need the space for later tonight. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was getting irritated and all I could think about was waking up early. This is where I think she became determined to sleep with me. My laughter might have been a sign. After that, she was all over me, hugging my arm and running her fingers through my hair. An hour went by and she started texting, which was my cue to leave. I got up, said my goodbyes, and left, only to be followed by her. I told her that her friend wasn't going to make it and that she was probably asleep with the guy she left with. She just nodded. I asked if she had any money and she shook her head. I told her she could crash on the sofa. She hopped on my bike and held me tightly, even tighter than before. We got home and I turned on the lamp by the door, pointing at the sofa. I went straight to my room to get sheets and a blanket, with her following closely behind. As she entered my room, I handed her the sheets and directed her to the bathroom. I wished her a good night and proceeded to bed, quickly throwing my clothes off. I promise you, I had no intentions whatsoever, but when you wake up to a mouth landing on your pole, you'd let it happen too. I don't know how long it lasted, but I painted her mouth only seconds after waking up. She laid next to me and I thanked her. She asked if I had a condom and round 2 commenced. In the morning, I woke her up and told her that I had to go. I invited her to have breakfast with me and my friends before we parted ways. The restaurant we frequented was Iranian, and I wanted her to remember this place for later. We greeted my friends, had breakfast, and I paid for both our meals. We said goodbye to my friends and I walked her to the rickshaw stand, giving her some money. I thanked her for the night and we parted ways. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was just the beginning of our story. At the time, I didn't realize that this relationship would only last approximately 7 to 8 months. We hooked up a few times and gradually became more intimate and exclusive. One day, my friends who knew her ex-boyfriend approached me and told me about her previous relationship. They were concerned, but I assured them that I wasn't worried about her past. However, they insisted on telling me that she had cheated on her previous boyfriend multiple times with different guys, even after they broke up. I was shocked and couldn't believe it, but my friends assured me that they weren't just gossiping. I also had a history of sleeping around, but not at the same rate as her. I was angry and confronted her about it. She denied it and spun a web of lies, but I didn't have any proof to dispute her claims. Looking back, I should have listened to my friends and ended things then and there. This was a major red flag, but I chose to believe her. Soon after, another red flag appeared. She was extremely insecure. It was a turning point in my life. Her insecurities were a clear sign that she was cheating. At first, she didn't like that I had many female friends. Then, she didn't want me to hang out with other girls. Later on, her demands became unreasonable. Here are 2 examples that I remember. One night, after a long night of partying, we were outside the club. I want to clarify that I was never in a bike gang, but my friends and I always left together. We were all foreigners and didn't have any family in India, so we always checked on each other via text. On this particular night, one of the other girls, who was prettier than my ex, approached me. My ex was behind me on my bike, and the girl asked me if we had any after-party plans. I looked around at my friends and told her that we were calling it a night and that she should ask my Sudanese friend. He was single and I knew he liked her. She thanked me and went straight to him. They ended up hooking up that night and are now married with 2 Sudanese Dutch boys. My ex was furious and accused me of having an affair. I told her that her insecurities were a result of her own actions, as she couldn't keep her legs closed. I also pointed out that she assumed I was a hoe because she was one herself. She didn't take it well. Looking back, I think she didn't argue back because she wasn't sure if I was telling the truth. I was guessing, or I knew something. The truth is, I had a gut feeling, but I had to prove it before making accusations. I should have just left. The second example is one I wish I had actually gone through with. Again, we were at a club. There was a Russian or Eastern European woman who was gorgeous, but she too was constantly flirting with other men. I guess it was my turn that night. We were on the dance floor and she was staring at me. I noticed it and it was intense. She was graceful and glided towards me. She stopped halfway, extended her arms, and gestured with open palms for me to come closer. I wish I had, but I gently shook my head and politely took a step back with a smile. The guys laughed and gestured a whipping sign at me. My ex saw this and stormed out. My friends and I laughed too. I had respectfully rejected her, yet my ex still found a reason to get mad. You see, at this point, I knew she wanted a reason to leave. That's what these types of women do. They make you think that you are the problem, so they can storm out, flirt with other men, and then come back. But she was smarter than me. I did mention earlier that she was intelligent. That's what I thought at the time. But I was catching on. My instincts were right, and I was an emotional wreck. At this point, she was cheating on me very frequently. I didn't know who, I didn't know where, when, or even how she kept eluding me. But it seemed to be whenever she went to her so-called aunt. She never had any of the guys' numbers that I suspected. She was saving them under girls' names. I was determined to find out, but she was always one step ahead of me, as if she knew what I was going to do. And then on a clear day, she disappeared, and I had no idea where she was. I called her, but she didn't pick up. I went to her friend's house, and they seemed very worried and hesitant to talk to me. They weren't worried that she disappeared. It was because I had started a manhunt. I told them that they were all pieces of shit for hiding something. They told me that I deserved better than her. In fact, all of her slutty friends always said that to me. However, this was the first time I truly understood what they meant by it. It's true, thieves have no honor amongst themselves. I guess it applies to hoes as well. These were her friends after all. I left and my ex came to my house later. I started to question her, but she was evasive. Then I told her that I had no place in my heart for someone who would cheat on me. She should keep her legs closed. When I turned to face her, I got a slap. It didn't hurt, physically. I didn't know how to react. I got flashbacks of my dad slapping my mom. It was humiliating. I just stared at her with tears in my eyes. I was holding back a rage I never felt before. My knees trembled as I tried to hold back the urge to strike back. I swore to never be that man. I walked away, locked my room, and began to sob hysterically. It had nothing to do with being scared or feeling weak. I cried because I felt like I was going insane and I couldn't prove anything. And I had no control. It was at this moment that I began to isolate myself and dread meeting others. Coupled with the holidays that would lead to the next semester and having more free time because I completed my diplomas, all of that didn't help. My ex was traveling out of state to visit her parents. This meant I had time to reflect on my life and the situation I found myself in. When I was alone, I remembered something my ex kept screaming about in one of our many fights. I don't recall what it was now, but what I do remember is coming to the realization that someone from my group of friends was telling my ex everything I was up to. It dawned on me that she was always ahead of me because someone was snitching on me, which always led to me failing in catching her in the act. I knew exactly which group of friends it could be. But there were only 2 people I suspected. Remember H, the guy who introduced me to her? Remember that Iranian restaurant? Well, something I didn't mention was when I kept encountering her, H approached me one day and asked if something was going on between us. I told him that there was nothing. He told me he wanted to sleep with her, to which I said, go for it. Then the whole buy me a drink, my friend is leaving me and walk me in the night happened. When I walked in with her to have breakfast at that Iranian restaurant, H was there. And he couldn't hide his anger. I told him later what had happened, and everything seemed fine. Or so I thought. He saw it as a betrayal, even when I told him that we weren't exclusive. He must have really resented me for that. He never showed it. H was also the person I suspected the most. My ex knew a lot, and I began to grow more convinced that H and my ex were talking behind my back. I had to know for sure. I just didn't know how. In search of a mole, days went by, and my ex and I broke up once again over the phone. Oh, we broke up so many times. This time I meant it. So, I went through my phone and looked through my contacts to find a girl I had been thinking about a lot and never had the chance to see it through. Surprisingly, not only did she answer my call, but she was very willing to come over and catch up. Not gonna lie, it boosted my confidence tremendously. She came over and our conversation was very tense. It was very flirty, and it was clear that she had certain intentions. I had almost forgotten how it felt to be so sexually aroused. The sexual tension between us kept building up until it exploded, with us having the most intense sexual experience I've ever had. We were like caged animals, and I could feel the walls sweating from the heat we radiated. When it was all over, we held each other tightly and began to talk. I asked why it took us so long to hook up. She gave me a puzzled stare and told me she always knew that I was out of her league. I got upset and told her I was into her the night we met. She spent the night, and all I can say is that the walls were starting to look more like a waterfall throughout the night. In the morning, we said our goodbyes. I knew for some reason that she needed this more than I did, and I was okay with it. Years later, I learned that she was going through something similar to me at the time, which just made so much sense and put a lot of things into perspective. Later that day, I met a friend who I suspected of snitching. I told him half the story, that I met someone and rekindled an old flame, but that we didn't have sex because I wanted to get closure before moving on. I told him her name was Priyanka, but it wasn't. I met H later and told him the whole truth, but changed her name to Radhika. I do want to acknowledge one person before I continue. He wasn't a close friend, but someone I bumped into on many occasions through mutual friends. This was obviously before I dated that psychopath. Anyway, this man once looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Dude, what the hell happened to you? You used to walk into a room and make people want to be around you." That sentence hit me hard. It was when the abuse got really bad, and I took it because the alternative was to become like my dad. That conversation might have been weeks before my ex left the state and the intense sexual experience with Priyanka Radhika. Things were looking up after that. I was starting to socialize once again. I wasn't in touch with any girls except my roommate. I didn't want to start anything yet, not until I got over my ex. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. I had no idea that somewhere thousands of feet in the air, my ex was heading straight to my city like a sandstorm, swarming with the most foul and malicious intentions to ruin me. How could I have known that Helmut Zemo would look like a children's book antagonist compared to what was getting off that plane? My phone rings and my heart starts pounding. The caller ID is my ex. I answer it, and she tells me that she wants to come. She said she wanted to come over to talk. I know I should have said no, but I needed to know the truth. The door knocked and I let her in. I was holding back my anger and I wanted to know everything. We greeted each other and I started to ask her questions. She dodged them and seemed more interested in what I was up to. I played dumb and persisted in asking who she was sleeping with. She kept turning the topic back to me and really wanted to know what I had been up to. I told her that I was socializing with other guys and I was hurting from her betrayal. She told me I only had blind accusations and that I had nothing. I told her I didn't need any proof, that I knew she was a cheating maggot. I didn't know who, why, where, or her reasons. All I knew was that even her slutty friends thought I deserved better. I then proceeded to lie and state as a matter of fact that it was her friends who told me everything. Her face twisted. I swear that bitch wanted to know which one. Before she could utter a word to lie again and say all of them, she paused and looked at the ceiling. I knew it was coming. She wanted to attack me. She raised her arm and told me to give her the motorcycle keys. I gave her a confused look. She told me she was leaving. I told her I paid for it and that the lease was under my name. I knew her broke-ass, good-for-nothing, leeching parasite would ask for the keys. Her face turned red and she pounced at me. Not this time. I grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and walked her straight to the door. She shouted and screamed. I opened the door and with one hand thrust her fat ass out. She tripped and turned to me with the most shocked face I had ever seen on her. It didn't suit her well. I think this is when she realized I was done with her. I stood up to her. I enjoyed her new look. I leaned forward and told her, "Never again will I allow you to lay your hands on me. You confuse my kindness for weakness. You knew that I despised men who hit women, and you abused me, knowing I would be defenseless. You are nothing without me. I own everything. I earn everything. Take your broke ass off my floor and be gone." Remember, I could have done worse. It was something like that. It might have been longer with more anger than calm. As I stepped back, she told me she knew about Radhika. I smiled and told her I knew. I made sure I told your best friend all the details. I hope your mouth doesn't land on his dick accidentally again. I gently closed the door. What came next was a shriek. I couldn't stop grinning. I went to my room and spent my day listening to music. For the first time, I enjoyed the peace of mind. Oh, did I mention that we were psychopaths? Well, here it comes. Guess who called me a few hours after I kicked out my now ex? It was H. I answered and he began to shout in hysteria. He told me he would whoop my ass. I responded with silence. He told me to meet him at his place in 1 hour. I agreed. I rode to his place, and his girlfriend rushed out, begging me to go home. I shouted towards her door, calling her a coward. He came out, red in the face. I took off my helmet, shirt, and belt and showed him my palms. He knew what it meant. He did the same. We both knew we were keeping it clean. I lunged at him and he landed a punch square in my face. I don't have any recollection of the fight. All I remember is trying to slow my breathing as I lay on the floor. I looked up to see his girlfriend looking down at me. I turned to see that he was also out of breath. I could see that his face and eyes were swollen. I was scared. I went into a blind rage. My best friend was on the ground beside me, but all I felt was betrayal and loathing for this man. My chest was heavy, but I managed to turn to him. I asked if he was still alive. He opened one eye and told me that I fought like a girl. My lungs were hurting now. I asked him if there was anything else he wanted to say. He scoffed. I got up and his girlfriend handed me my things. I think she felt sorry for me. I think she knew what he did and she didn't approve. I thanked her and told her to put him to bed and not to put ice so that everyone could see what happened. I went back home, took a shower, and went to bed. I didn't sleep much and cried all night. I lost a friend, and nothing could change that now. I fell asleep and woke up the next day even more sore. Luckily, my face had a few scratches, but my knuckles were red, black, and blue. I had to have surgery to fix my thumb with 2 platinum needles. When the doctor told me I needed surgery and it was really bad, I finally got to say, "You should see the other guy." There were no lawsuits. We had a fair and square fight, and in truth, none of us gained anything from it. I started dating a few months later and heard from H's brother that on the night I fought his brother, my ex had kissed some other guy. This was another friend from my home country, and I had no hard feelings about it. I was glad she was out of my life, and he had no reason to say no. Riding his scooter, my friend got into a horrible accident sometime later. We are all foreign students, and we have to stick together. I went to the hospital only to learn that he was in a coma, and that the hospital wouldn't lift a finger until they were paid. We all chipped in, and the surgery went well. We took turns watching over him and getting his medication. He woke up 9 days later. My ex, who is now his girlfriend, never came to the hospital to see him. H was there, but we both had other concerns. When he finally woke up, H and his brother were there and told him what had happened. I visited later and told him that I heard he tried to break an electric pole with his head. It was funnier in our language. When he was discharged, I got a call from H who told me we needed to talk. We met at a restaurant by my flat, and what he told me made my jaw drop. The night of the accident, my ex was fighting with her boyfriend and forced him to go out and buy alcohol. He was already too drunk to be riding when he got into the accident. She somehow, with no remorse, managed to land her mouth on some other guy's Johnson. She knew it was her fault that he went out in the first place. H apologized and told me he had no idea what kind of wretched filth my ex was. I forgave him and we remained friends, but understandably never close. You would think it was over, and that's the end of it, but for me, it was a new beginning. One night, H's ex-girlfriend called. She too had been cheated on by him. She was not the same girl who tried to stop us from brawling, and G was his previous girlfriend. She asked me if I wanted to get together with her and a friend for drinks and vent about our exes. I thought it was a great idea. We met at a bar and never brought up our exes. We had a great time and went out to a club. Little did I know, this MSNG here was playing matchmaker. Thanks to her, I met who I now call my wife. She is my right hand, the one who stands by me and is the mother of my children. We got married 4 years later and built a home together. She even put herself between me and a guy who wanted to shoot me with his AK. We have been together for 15 years now and have an inside joke that our children look so much like me that we suspect my wife isn't their mother. As for my ex, she made a few attempts to break us up and get back with me once she realized no one wanted to be with her, and everyone knew the truth. I found out sometime later that the night I kicked her out, she went to her friend's place, smashed her face in the mirror, tore her clothes, and walked out barefoot. She went to H's place and claimed I did it to her, but her own friend ratted her out when she found out what she was trying to do. My ex also tried to become my wife's friend back when we were dating. I had finished university and had to complete my 6-month compulsory military service after Uni-NG, warned my wife at the time, and all was safe. When I returned to India after my service to do my master's, my wife and I became exclusive. My ex was enraged. One night while out clubbing, my ex and one of her friends kept walking by me, laughing as loudly as possible. My girlfriend, my friends, and I looked at each other. She really wanted my attention. She sent a long text message later that night, blaming me for everything and how I broke her heart. I just blocked her. A few days later, she appeared at my doorstep, pretending that she forgot something at my place. I told her that my girlfriend was asleep and that she wasn't welcome. She went on a tangent, something about how I deserved more and that my girlfriend was laughing at me with her friend. It was a feeble attempt and I shut the door on her. In February of 2011, I headed back to my home country to get things ready. My girlfriend and I were about to tie the knot, and she was getting ready to move to my country. I let everyone know the wedding date. That's when my ex made her last attempt. Out of nowhere, she called me from an Indian number I didn't know. I answered, and it was her. She informed me that her father had passed away, and I offered my condolences. I had never met her father in person, but we got along great on the phone. We spoke about her father and what led to his demise. A week later, she called again. I think she found out that I was getting married, and she made her last-ditch effort. She congratulated me, then did a complete 180 and begged me not to marry her. Her last words to me were, "She doesn't even get your jokes." I replied, "Well, I guess you'll never get to hear the punchline then." And I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. She tried adding me on social media through proxy accounts, but I don't add people I've never met in person. Just so you know, I omitted a lot. Things like her making fake accounts during our relationship to see if I would cheat, learning my passwords and messaging my female friends nasty things, ruining my friendships, stalking my dates, getting close to people I held dear, telling them lies, and making me out to be a horrible person, and so on. I hope this story helps other men struggling. If you were to ask me how to spot a red flag, I'd tell you not to even look. If you suspect something and you feel it, dump her. If something changes, don't try to find out, just leave. Thank you for reading my story. Feel free to ask anything.